Welcome, Emily, to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, if you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a conscious parenting coach, and really my journey to becoming a conscious parenting coach was because of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Anger, frustration, also a little sprinkle of mum rage
Oh,
in
yes.
there. And so, yeah, as well as being a coach, I'm also trained in breathwork and somatic therapy because I really think in order to tackle these big issues of anger and frustration that so many parents face and are so common, I think, and I really believe it requires a brain body approach because, as I'm sure everyone is aware, when we're feeling angry and frustrated, it's not just
Mhm.
in our head, it's a full body experience. So I kind of weave in bits of my somatic body focused work in with the coaching to really help nurture the whole of the parents that I work with.
That sounds amazing because I think anger and frustration, it's such a big thing in
Mm.
parenting, and it's something that people are kind of afraid to talk about, especially mums who
Yeah.
carry a lot of the emotional weight and burdening of the house.
Mm.
And so it feels a little bit that you are unable to sort of handle yourself because you get so so mad or so angry, and you end up sort of feeling a lot of shame around it.
Yeah.
And but if we just go right back to the beginning of this, what would you say is sort of the main triggers of anger and frustration in when you were every day in the trenches
Yeah.
parenting day by day?
And I think it starts really early on for some people. And in my personal experience, it started very early on when my first child was a baby. And,
Yeah.
people talk about, quite rightly, postnatal anxiety and postnatal depression, but there is also postnatal rage, which is a thing
Mm.
that's getting a little bit more media coverage. And I really had postnatal rage and did not realize that I had postnatal rage until I went to therapy when I was pregnant with my second
Mhm.
child, and I was reflecting back on that experience in my
Ah,
first year. And then the therapist suggested perhaps it was this, and I was like, oh, that's what it was. And I think you really by mentioning shame, I think that's a
mhm.
really core part of where this is rooted in. I just want to define shame. So, this is Brené Brown's definition. So,
Yeah.
shame is the feeling that we are fundamentally flawed and
Mhm.
therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And I think this can come up so much because, we have, none of us have ever been a parent before.
No.
We're doing it for the first time when we have our
Mhm.
first child. And a lot of us don't have that kind of intergenerational, tight knit community support. So we're doing it alone. And so there's that quite naturally, there can be this thing that comes up as in, like, am I doing this right? Am I failing?
Mm.
Because we
Yeah.
just don't have that wisdom, like the sort of wise elder is missing. And we really deeply need that wise elder to kind of scoop us up and tell us you
Agreed.
belong and you're doing
Yeah.
okay. So I think that's part of it. And I think another part of it is about control.
Yes. I'm so glad you
Because,
said that.
yeah, because the thing is, we can go our whole lives up
Mhm.
until parenting, well, our whole adult lives,
Mhm.
feeling like we are in control of our lives. And then children come along, and
Mhm.
suddenly we feel like we're not in control anymore because
Because
human
we're not.
beings, it's a messy experience because we're
Yeah,
not
we're not.
exactly. Human beings, it's a wild ride. It's a messy experience
Mm.
being a human. We're
Yes.
emotional beings. And there can be this thing that really comes up, which is a bit like this.
Mm.
This is out of control.
Mhm.
I am not inherently safe because this feels out of control. And then I think anger and frustration often come up as protective behaviors because we
Yeah.
feel out of control. And I think that's such a much more generous way of looking at anger, rage, and frustration. That they come up really to protect us because we might not be feeling inherently safe in our parenting journey. So I always
Mm-hmm.
say, the answer is not how do I, or the question is not how do I stop shouting in my parenting, right? The question, if we shift it to how can I feel safer in my
Mm-hmm.
parenting? And then naturally we shout less if we're feeling safer.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of what it boils down to,
Yes,
is that inner safety. Do I feel
it
safe?
is. And I can just kind of see that whole circle of it. If you feel safe, your child will feel safe. And you might find a lot of the behaviors get shifted just because of that safety. Because even a small, tiny baby picks up on your anxiety, picks up on your fear, picks up on all that. And
Mm,
they don't know how to process that. They don't have the language for it. So they might cry a lot more. And then, which
mm,
then increases your frustration because you're like,
yeah.
why are you crying? I fed you, I've bathed you, I've done all
Mm,
that. And
mm,
now, but it's still not sort of solve the problem. And then again, is that control of why can't I figure this out? Why
yeah.
can't I make this work? And I just wanted to go back quickly to what you said about we need that nurturing. And I
Mm,
think mothers need that. Mothers need mothering when
yeah.
they're being mothers.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense? We need that kind of nurture and someone to sort of walk that path with us. And
Mm,
it's strange because, especially somebody who hadn't been mothered as a young child,
mm,
to then become a mother and not have that, you've not been poured into to be able to be poured out of, so
mm,
that there's
mm.
that weird resistance because you don't quite know what to do. So you said so many interesting things that have got me my
Yeah.
brain sort of ticking. I wanted to just quickly talk about, because anger gets a bad rap, really,
Mm,
and
mm,
there's healthy and unhealthy anger. So how are
mm.
we differentiating it and not be scared of just anger in general?
Yeah. And I think one of the core things here is if we are believing that a good parent, and I'm doing some inverted commas there, if
Yeah.
a good parent is always calm,
Mm.
I don't think that that is realistic because we are humans, we are emotional beings. And if a parent was always being calm, I think that probably means that they would always be repressing. And that's
Mm.
not good. So when we shift the goal to not how do I be calm all the time, but how do I not get stuck in
Mm.
anger? How can I really love the word nimble. How can I have a nimble nervous system? How can I have a nimble relationship with my emotions so that I can go into anger and frustration and not get stuck there?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing, like I still get angry and frustrated. Like
Mm-hmm.
I still do. But the difference between where I am now and where I was before is I do not get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I want to touch on, which just I loved in what you were saying about, like, if you didn't have that nurturing and nourishing, which so many of us did not have, one of the
Mm.
things that I think we can bring in to help us when we are in fight or flight in our nervous systems is we can bring in the voice of benevolent leadership. So this is a
Mm-hmm.
tool I work with my clients on, and it's about practicing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit like this: when we're in that heated, when our body is on fire with anger and frustration, it's a little bit like this. Like if we had a soothing, benevolent, kind, wise leader, what would they say to you right now?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't have that soothing inner voice, because that
Mm-hmm.
soothing inner voice comes from our own parents. And if our
Mm-hmm.
parents did not give us that soothing inner voice, because that comes from that repetition of how they spoke to us,
Yes.
if we did not have that, we can start to cultivate that ourselves through
Mm-hmm.
practice and repetition. So I just love this tool of, like, when you're in that heat of that moment, if I had a kind, soothing, benevolent leader right here with me now, what would
Mm-hmm.
they say to me? And just start practicing that every day,
Mm-hmm.
multiple times per day. And that's giving you that support, because that's what
Yeah.
we really need. So we
Yeah.
don't feel so alone in our anger and frustration.
And it's funny because we will tell our children that. I tell my
Yeah.
kids that all the time. Well, speak to yourself like you're your own best friend. We hear that
Mm-hmm.
saying, don't we? But yet sometimes we feel like we have to be critical of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves because we maybe expect perfection or
Yeah.
something, And like you said, if you've not had that nurturing voice, you're gonna have to give it to yourself. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, that feels a little bit alien or unnatural. But you got
Yeah.
to start from somewhere. So start with what would you say to your best friend, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of say that to yourself. So I wanted to go into what are the warning signs. Two things when you can feel yourself getting into that stage of anger and
Mm-hmm.
frustration, because I think a lot of people are not connected to their body anyway. So
Yeah.
they don't know. That's why you hear about people going from 0 to 100, because they
Mm-hmm.
haven't been able to slow it right down to before they get to that 100. So it's a two-part question, really. How do you sort of start feeling when you're getting to that place of anger? And then when do you know that you've moved into unhealthy anger?
Yeah. So I think it's really useful to start doing a bit of body mapping.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do this when you are calm, right? And it's as simple as, and I would urge anyone listening right now to just do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, draw a little outline of a body.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're feeling calm and centered and grounded,
Mm-hmm.
just ask yourself, what goes on in my body when I'm feeling angry? So I'll tell you what goes on in my body when I'm feeling angry. I get a lot of activation in my jaw.
Mm.
And that's always a warning sign to me. And one of the things that is can be really helpful is to consciously focus on just loosening the jaw and loosening the tongue.
I
And
did
there's
that
a
just now, actually, when you were talking. I went,
do it,
loosen
everybody,
it.
right now. Loosen the jaw, loosen the tongue,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a sort of like from when we were like early humans, like this jaw is like gets
Yeah.
locked because this is like the fight. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're ready to like bite or ready to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like snarl. And just kind of soothing the jaw, and maybe bring your hands up right now and just
Yeah.
soothing the jaw,
Yeah, I love that.
soothing the
Oh.
tongue, and just bringing that little bit of like safety to that area.
Mm.
Another thing that happens to me is real activation of my arms. And
Mm-hmm.
if you've ever seen, there's this thing, I think it's called the PNAS body maps. And
Okay.
basically, they interviewed all of these people cross culturally across different countries, and they did this body mapping process of like, where do you feel these emotions in your body? And if
Mm-hmm.
you look at and they sort of do them like heat maps. And if
Right.
you look
Yeah.
at the one for anger and frustration, it's all like in the top half of the body in the arms.
Mm.
And, a lot of parents struggle with arm grabbing. They don't want to grab their child's arm when they're
Mm-hmm.
angry and frustrated, but it happens. And the reason why that happens is because we get a lot of activation in our arms, right? And those
Ah.
parents desperately, they're coming to coaching because they desperately don't want to be grabbing their child's arm.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of important to note that, like, if you have a strong anger activation in your arms, you're probably
Mm-hmm.
going to need to do something else with your arms that involves not touching your child.
Mm.
And that, other parents, what happens when they're angry is they maybe pick up their child and
Mm-hmm.
take them to somewhere else, but they do it in a way that is kind of gets a bit
Yes.
ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what I would suggest is bringing some soothing into the arms. And it might be that it's like rubbing your arms. It
Mm-hmm.
might be that you need to kind of push against your arms to get that kind of like activation in your arms under control. So, like putting your palms together and just
Mm-hmm.
pushing. And that can just help you get a little bit more control when we're feeling like our
Yeah.
arms are getting really activated. Because what I know about those parents who do those behaviors, that arm grabbing and that lifting their children, they desperately don't want to be doing that. They see
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, things get ugly really quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
they're just feeling like so activated. Just being aware, like, what's going on in my arms? Do I need to give like some soothing to that area?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to take a bit of like control? back into that area. And yeah, I would also kind of, one of the things I think to note is if our anger was suppressed when we were children, if we were not allowed to be angry, what can come up sometimes is sort of like the need to almost like have a mini tantrum ourselves, right? And if we look at what our children do, like small children, what they do when they're angry, they jump up and down, they stomp, they clench their fists. And sometimes it might be that like we need to, in a safe way that's not going to scare our children, sort of like give ourselves a little bit of like activation, like do some of that kind of like, but one of the things you can do to make it not scary for your children is just say, I'm doing a little angry dance and I need to shake. And I think shaking can be such a powerful way of taking back control and deactivating. And it's really useful to note that mammals shake in order to move between nervous system states.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I love that you've given physical things to do, because honestly, I think we all need to move beyond. Take a deep breath and count to 5.
100%.
You know,
what happens often when we hear that, take a deep breath, when you are really activated in anger and frustration, what happens is people sort of go like, and that is actually not calm and not soothing.
No.
And sometimes like if taking a deep breath is working for you,
of course, that's fine.
Keep doing it, right? But if it's not working for you, try something physical, because sometimes focusing on the breath when we're really activated can actually make some people feel more panicked. Focusing on the breath when you are calm, like that's great as a kind of like preventative thing. But if it's making you feel more stressed to focus on the breath, maybe do some mindful movement, like wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, bring some attention to the whole body. Find what feels safe for you.
And even I think, add it to sort of daily tasks. If it feels a bit weird for you to shake, because I do, I go on my tippy toes go down, up and down, up and down. But sometimes I just walk into the bedroom and I start folding anything I see. Fold just to move around. Because if you're not the sort of person that can go, and you can do that, breathe while you're doing something else. And in a way, you're modeling to your child that, hey, I'm taking a minute now. Let's all take a minute and just calm down. Because the other thing I wanted to mention was sometimes you're not ready to calm down.
100%.
And you don't want to, because you're really angry about something. And sometimes you have a right to be angry about something.
Definitely.
And it's not fair to sort of circumvent that emotion and say, well, you can't be angry because, so it's all about finding a way to handle the anger. So what would you say when you're not quite ready to let go of the anger, but obviously you don't want to do anything that's going to hurt yourself, anybody, or things?
And I think part of this kind of depends slightly on how old your children are, because can you leave your children alone?
Yes.
That's kind of part of it. If you can't leave your children alone and you really need to discharge the anger, and you have to be in the same room with them, just like narrating what you're doing and maybe bringing a little bit of silliness to it too, because that can make it not scary, but you're still having that same energy. So how you can maybe bring a bit of silliness into it is kind of like maybe like with your mouth, or like and sometimes and if you can take a bit of space away from your children, like finding that space to go and really discharge. But I think this is all about timing, because what we don't want to be doing is teaching our body to be getting angry, right? So it's almost like if you're on the way up, right, at that point we can try and like regulate things down. But if you are already so far up in anger, we can't do that. We need to deactivate, right? So I think a lot of this is all about timing, right? Where am I at? Can I bring myself down through soothing, Or do I need to discharge by jumping up and down for 5 minutes because I'm just way beyond the soothing point?
Yes.
And I think part of this is just really deeply tuning into yourself and asking yourself, what do I need right now? Am I at the point where soothing is going to work? Or am I at the point where only like a healthy aggression release of like jumping up and down, like basically having a controlled tantrum, like
yeah, like
controlled
that control
adult
tantrum.
Am I at that point where only that will work? And this is a part of like de-shaming that actually like you deserve to ride the wave of anger, expression, and emotion. You deserve it. And it's not shameful. It's natural.
It's natural.
Biological. It's your body. Like it's not something that needs to be squelched. Because ultimately anger comes up for a reason. And we might touch upon that, like why does anger come up? Because it doesn't come up randomly. It's always coming up as a messenger to let you know when something is not quite right.
I was going to say actually that that is so true, that we need to let the emotion run its course, and we need to do that for our kids as well. We need to allow them to run its course, because so often we don't want to hear it. You're upset? Stop that right now. I was like, who can stop it right now? We expect them to go from crying to switch it off, you know? And most of the time is because we expect that from ourselves. So if you're going to give yourself that permission to ride that anger and let it just run its course safely, allow the same for your child. And we know it's difficult, especially when you're in ASDA and and everyone's looking at you and you just want them to stop it right now. But I think we as a society have to accept that it's not normal and it's not natural to just cut the emotion short, because it gets stored somewhere. It doesn't go away. It's somewhere, and it's probably coming back tenfold. Most likely.
Know what really, really helped me? I could handle my eldest child's anger and frustration for about 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, I could not handle it anymore.
It's too much now. Yeah, after a while.
Now, what shifted for me was actually this, which I was seeing a parent coach at the time. And she said this to me. She said, what would it be like to expect the anger to last for 2 hours? And this might sound a bit weird, but actually that changed everything for me. Because when I was expecting my son's anger to last for 2 hours, I found acceptance. And I'm like, I could like resign myself to that. And I would say to myself, like, this is going to take 2 hours. But then, of course, naturally, because I was accepting and calm and co-regulating in my nervous system, because I found that acceptance and I wasn't in panic, naturally it didn't last 2 hours, and it was kind of more like 25 minutes. Obviously, you know, something to mention here, if you're listening and you're a child who's got a child with you're a parent with a child who's got neurodiversity, like children with neurodiversity, their meltdowns and anger and big emotions can really last for a very long time. And there may be like nothing that you can do. Obviously, there are some things, but it may be limited because your child just really needs to release the overwhelm. And when I think you reframe it as, this is my child releasing overwhelm, that can really help you to find that piece of acceptance. That actually I can, and it's also a belief that I can handle this. I can handle my child's anger expression for a long time. And when you resign yourself to that and accept it, I think things get easier.
I 100% agree with you. I think that's with parenting in general, because I remember with my son, my eldest, when I was breastfeeding, and he would just breastfeed for like ages, like nonstop. But I was in a way expecting that. Then I spoke to another mum who was like, all they want to do is just stay on the boob. And she got really frustrated by that. So, and there was two different ways of handling it because she did not expect that. Again, is managing expectations,
Yeah.
did not want to accept that. It really bothered her. Whereas I was more like, well, that's what they do, their babies. So there was less resistance. And the more you resist
Mm.
something, a lot of frustration and anger is going to
Yeah,
come out,
exactly.
you know?
And I think this expectation is such an important piece here. And the question is, are you getting angry because you feel like your expectation has been
Mm-hmm.
violated? And then the
Mm-hmm.
question might be, well, was your expectation realistic
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for your child's age and stage? And when I say stage, then I'm kind of with that neurodiversity piece. That obviously,
Yes.
that stage might not correlate to the age exactly. So, or maybe like for who your child is, or for where
Yes.
your child's
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity dials are at.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people have a tricky time with this because they're like, well, I want to have high expectations of my child, and high
Mm-hmm.
expectations are great, but it's like realistic expectations
Yes.
too. And that question of like, are my expectations of my child realistic?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are given a great disservice in our culture that we are given
Mm-hmm.
no education as parents on normal child
Yes.
development. So
Yeah. Yeah.
oftentimes what children are doing is
Mm-hmm.
normal for their age and stage, but we may be conditioned to believe that it's not normal.
Yes.
And then it feels like a violation of our
Yes.
expectation. And it also feels like that shame bit comes in because you feel like you're failing. When
Yes.
actually the truth
Yeah.
may be, this is completely normal. And one of the questions I ask ask my clients when I'm working with them is, who are you comparing this to?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we're comparing our child's behavior to some imaginary child.
Totally.
And so
Absolutely.
and sometimes we're comparing our family life to some imaginary family that does not
Yeah.
exist.
Exist. It is so true. I really want to make sure the listeners sit with that for a little bit. Just that whole I think it's a root of so much, this expectation, this comparison, and
Mm.
lack of acceptance for what is. Because
Yeah,
even if you do have high
yeah.
expectations, you got to still accept what is,
Mm.
before you can even start changing anything. So I
Yeah.
really thought that was really, really important and powerful.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
love I
wanted,
love
oh, sorry.
so I love what Brené Brown says about this. When
Hmm.
comparison comes up,
Yes.
when your child is, doing this over here, and you're like looking at other people, and it seems like their children are just like,
Mm.
quietly getting on with things. Like one of the things that she says that you can do is just wish those people a good day. Good day to
Good
you.
day to
I
you.
wish you well. And actually, then it's almost like you're putting in a little bit of a boundary there. As in,
Yeah.
like, you're over there, go, like,
Yeah.
you do
Go
your
in peace.
thing, go in peace.
Yes.
I'm over here doing my
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is okay.
And one of the best things you can do for yourself and your child is to have that acceptance of
Mm.
who they are. Because when they feel like you're constantly trying to change them,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
gonna bring up anger and frustration
yeah,
in
yeah.
them, you know?
And also in you, because if you're kind of unable to accept them for who they truly are, and you're always
Yes.
kind of wanting them to change a bit in some way, then
Mm-hmm.
you can never just be peaceful and settled. And I
Mm-hmm.
think part of this is like deconditioning ourselves from narcissistic parenting, because I think conscious parenting is the opposite of
Yes.
narcissistic parenting. And
Yeah.
narcissistic parenting is parenting more for how things look
Mm-hmm.
than that this sort of true soulful connection between
Yeah.
who you are and in all your authenticity, and who your child
Yeah.
is in all of their authenticity.
Yes, absolutely. And also not expecting, again, back to expectations, your child to be able to do something that you have not been able to do yourself or don't
100%.
expect yourself to
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you know. Um, what I wanted to talk about quickly was undealt with, repressed anger
Mm,
and it's simmering.
Mm.
underneath, you can just kind of feel it. Can you talk a little bit about what that does to the family dynamic when there's lots of sort of simmering anger that's not being dealt with in a healthy manner?
Yeah, I think simmering anger can just really put our nervous systems on a constant state of hypervigilance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if we grew up in a household where there was a lot of like simmering anger, we might need to there's a I think it is there's a book called Healing Rage, and she talks a lot about, can't remember who the author is, but she talks a lot about reconnecting with your inner rage child.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have heard of like inner child work. This is an
Mm-hmm.
interesting one where you reconnect with your inner rage child.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically, through some like meditation, just spend some time allowing your inner child, imagining you at whatever age it might be, like 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
just allowing them to be really angry and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like saying to your inner rage child, it is safe for you to express this
Mm-hmm.
rage. And I think there can be there can be a lot, like there can be a real gift to yourself when you because some people are like, for me, I've always been quite connected to my anger, but for some
Mm-hmm.
people they're very disconnected from their anger because they've spent so much
Yeah.
of their lives sort of
Yeah.
repressing it, and this is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what I absolutely love is dance,
Oh yes. Yes.
because dance can be a really healthy way
Mm-hmm.
of reconnecting with your anger in a
Mm-hmm.
way that is safe. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of like ecstatic dance where you like, it's basically kind of like a sober rave with intention. And so you basically go to like a big hall and
Yeah.
you just dance for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Everyone's sober and you like set an intention for your dance. That is too much for you. Like I've got on my YouTube, I've made a playlist of some dance meditations that other people have made, and they're just like 15 minutes, like
Mm-hmm.
connecting with. So that might be a bit out there, but I think it's a fun and playful way of connecting
Yeah.
with anger. If you are unable to to healthily express anger, if it's been so
Mm-hmm.
repressed in you, try dance.
I love that. I was a dancer back in a previous life. So
Yeah,
I think movement in general is so important, just to move that energy around your body because it's so sort of stuck. But you mentioned rage. So talk to me about mum rage.
yeah. So I think mum rage, there's a lot going on. I
Uh-huh.
would sort of define it as this disproportionate reaction. Disproportionate because often what our child is doing is normal behavior, but it
Uh-huh.
feels like a fire has gone off in our body. And often it comes down to these two things: overwhelm in the mind and the brain, because
Mm-hmm.
of like the mental load and all of the stuff that you have to think
Yeah.
about. So we've got like the mind is overwhelmed, and then we've got the body is overstimulated. And sensory overstimulation, right?
Yes.
So we've got overwhelm, overstimulation, and then it happens so quickly that it's just
Yeah.
full rage. So the questions then might not be how do we stop the rage? The
Mm-hmm.
questions might be like how do we preventatively soothe
Mm-hmm.
the overwhelm and soothe the overstimulation?
Mm-hmm.
Some of that might be, really practical stuff that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
but some of it might be more like sort of like tending and nourishing yourself. Because if you're living in survival mode,
Yeah.
then those overwhelm and overstimulation are going to feel very intense for you. So I think some of it's about really tending to the root.
Mm-hmm.
And where can I bring myself soothing, grounding,
Yeah.
resourcing, nourishment, so that I am not getting so overwhelmed and so overstimulated. So I think it's not a quick fix. I think it's a long journey of
Mm-hmm.
knowing that we are worthy of being soothed,
Yes.
knowing that we are
Yeah.
worthy of being nourished and
Mm-hmm.
nurtured.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, because these are the two big things for me to prevent mum rage, is self-awareness and
Mhm.
self-care,
Yeah,
making sure that I'm looking after myself
yeah,
and making sure I'm being honest with myself about
mhm.
what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and do I need to be doing it?
Yeah.
Because often you get pulled
Boundaries,
along.
basically. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
But if you're not self-aware, if you don't know who you are, what you like to do, what you can't handle, you're going to get sort of pulled along and wonder why you're so angry. But
yeah,
have you taken the time to stop to say these are my boundaries? Do you even know what they are? Do you know
yeah.
what you need? Do you know?
And believing that you are worthy of having boundaries.
Yes.
And just to like define a boundary, because obviously people talk about like boundaries in the
Uh-huh.
way that we like rules around the house, perhaps like the way you interact with your children. But what are your
Uh-huh.
personal boundaries? And just to like
Yes.
define that, I like explaining it like what are you willing to do and what are you willing not to do?
Uh-huh.
But some of that, what are you willing to do, might be like, you might feel like, God, I really don't want to put my child to bed, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't want to do that. But that serves your long term goals. So therefore, you're willing to do it. So it's kind of like,
Yes.
what am I willing to do because it serves my goals? Short term, long term. What
Uh-huh.
am I willing to do because it serves my nervous system? Am I
Yeah.
willing to do things that completely deplete and fry my nervous system? This has been a big one for me. Like
Yeah.
saying no to stuff because it overwhelms you and overstimulates you. And are you willing to go there anymore? And
Uh-huh.
that's a boundary. When you say no, I'm not. I mean, I feel a little. There's a tinge of guilt here, but someone asked me to do something for my school PTFA last week, and it was going to be like a really kind of involved thing, and I was kind of umming and ahhing about it. And actually, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm really not willing to do that right now. There's stuff that I am willing to do for the PTFA.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll design the PTFA a poster. That's my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's your thing.
Anytime you need a poster made, I will make your poster.
Yes.
I am
Yeah.
willing to do that. But am I willing to help plan events? No, because I know that that fries my nervous system.
Yes. Yes.
And it's in the past, I knew it fried my nervous system and I would have done it anyway.
You did it anyway. Yeah.
And
That's
now it's like
right.
I'm not willing to do that because I
Yeah.
see I get frazzled, I see I get fried, I see then I
Yes.
start getting into like anger, rage, frustration.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just as a final takeaway, what can anybody do on a sort of day-to-day basis, daily practices to just find a bit more balance? Because it's about not being pulled up and down all the time, but how do we feel a bit more balanced throughout the day?
My number one word would be soothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think so many of us were inadequately soothed as children,
Yeah.
and we are operating at like a soothing deficit. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
more we can bring soothing into our lives, soothing ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
soothing our children, but it's very hard to soothe your children if your body is on fire. So,
Yeah.
soothing yourself
Yeah.
first. And I think prioritizing soothing is
Yeah.
one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, because when you prioritize soothing, you naturally have better boundaries because you
Yeah.
become aware of what is soothing and what is frazzling to you,
Yeah.
right? If you and soothing is like, I deserve to be soothed.
Mm-hmm.
Soothing's
Mm-hmm.
just like soothing your mind with maybe that voice of like that kind,
Mm-hmm.
benevolent leader, soothing your body with some of those exercises and being kind and gentle with your body.
Yeah.
Just a whole load of soothing. That's what I
Yes.
would, that
Yeah.
would be kind of like my like gift. If I could give this
Hmm.
gift, it would be like that you are like worthy of being soothed.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Um, yeah, so how can our listeners find out more about you online and connect with you?
So I am on social media at Finding Flow Parenting, and my website is findingflowparenting.coach. And I also run, if you're in London, I run some mother circles and parent circles. So I run a parent circle in Leytonstone called Nourish the Parent, and I
Mm-hmm.
run one called for mothers called Mothers Rising in
Hmm.
Gospel Oak. And yeah, I do one-to-one coaching. I work with co-parents. I work
Hmm.
with people from all over the world on Zoom, and I also do group coaching. And I am in the process of making, I've done like a mini course with people on this topic of anger,
Hmm.
rage, and frustration. And I'm in the process of like packaging that up as like something that people can like buy and download
Yeah.
and self-study. So that's coming
Oh,
in the
perfect.
pipeline.
Yeah,
I've
I'd love
always
to hear
got a
more
million
about that.
ideas.
Always got something going on, yeah.
Yeah.
And are your mother circles for mum and babies, or is
So
it just
yeah, the one in Leytonstone, Nourish the Parent, that is
yeah,
to come along with babies to school age, but also
okay.
people can come without their children as well,
Yeah.
and that mums and dads can come to that. And then the one in Gospel Oak is just mothers without their children. And yeah, I did my first one of that yesterday. It was beautiful, and
Was it?
I think we need so many more of these
Agree.
things, like women's circles, mothers' circles, parents' circles,
Yes.
men's circles as well, like gathering in circle to hold space for each
Yes.
other.
I love that because I was thinking of starting one, and
Do
the
it,
fact
do
that
it,
you've
do
just
it.
mentioned that, I think it's a sign.
It's a sign. Do it.
I just think, we just need support. We need to be nourished. And you know what I've taken away from you today? So thank you. Soothing,
Yeah.
soothing myself, just taking more time and being more intentional about that. And you're worthy to be soothed and to look up, to be looked after.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your little wisdom and gems. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.